Okay, hello. My name's Brianne. Thank you for coming along. So, um, this is me back in, I think I was 19 years old, and I was full of idealism and hope for the future. I just started at university, and I was super stoked to be finally studying what I was obsessed with, which was science, right? So I've always been obsessed with the environment and animals and in, insects even, and literally everything in the natural world. So I would go and rescue worms. In fact, I still rescue worms from puddles of water. I'm an odd kid, probably. So I was really stoked that I could go to university and study what I wanted, which was a biological sciences degree. What was a little disappointing, however, when I got back from my first day of lectures, like the true loser I am, slash was, hopefully was, I came home and nobody was in the flat because everyone was at their part-time jobs. Now, I didn't have anyone to get excited with, but also I have always hated working for other people. I know most people hate their jobs, but I really hate it. I'm not very good at being told what to do, particularly if I don't see the point. If there's no real purpose behind it, then I really, really don't want to do it. It's a massive character flaw. So really that was the factor that caused me to start my very first business, my first real business, because my first actual business, or my first play business, I suppose, I started when I was 8 years old and was a pet detective company. I told you I was a weird child. Um, so my first company was, you've already seen the slide, was something called Pure Essentials, and it was a cosmetics company. So my mum actually handmade that logo, and I launched it probably an hour after deciding I wanted to. I had some basic cosmetic knowledge because I used to mix things up in my kitchen. Like I said, I liked experimenting with a bit of science. Usually it was flower petals and water, but it got a bit more. They're a bit more complex now, obviously. So I researched ingredients, bought a few from an online store in New Zealand, started making a mess in the kitchen. My dad built me a mold. My mum built the logo and some of the branding. And then I built, and all you website designers out there, please don't judge me I built that. I don't think it's that bad really in comparison, but it actually, you can still go and see it on the Wayback Web machine. But you know what? Despite looking like that, and despite being a little bit amateur, we sold quite a lot of products, and they were well reviewed. I enjoyed making them, and it earned me enough money to pay rent so that I didn't have to go into work. Like my flatmates did at the time. So I got to study what I loved, and then I also got to start exploring the business world, which I found I also really loved. However, I really quite quickly ran into problems. The first one was I couldn't focus. As you can probably tell, I'm a reasonably scatty person. I wanted to create new products all the time rather than focusing on the few that I already had. So I wanted to be more creative than business minded, and that's probably still true today. The second was that I wasn't really making enough product to keep up with demand. And that's actually happened several times over. And it's all well and good everybody saying that that's a good problem to have, but it's actually not, because you annoy your customers stop coming back, and it's a very, very easy way to lose those customers permanently. So what does a rational person do in this situation? Well, I actually pushed pause on my favorite thing, which was university, and I started a second business. Now, this second company was a new invention, I guess, and it was called Spoonable Fudge. So it's like a cross between mousse and fudge, and like the name says, it was designed to be eaten with a spoon. And the logo was a professional logo designer, as you can probably tell this time. And the cute little pot is called Sir Tubbington. I wanted Mr. T, but everyone was frightened of being sued. So Sir Tubbington it was. So again, it was super creative. I got to spend some time creating new flavors, but I had the same sort of issue. So despite my mother and I, who has worked for me forever, spending scores of hours a week manufacturing hundreds of kgs of fudge, we couldn't keep up with demand again. So the same problem happened because I was more focused on the creative side of business and not so much making it a business, I suppose. So after a bit of reflection and trying to figure out what it is I actually wanted to do, and at this point in time, I was about 23 and I was feeling pretty lost. I wasn't in a good place financially. I wasn't probably in a great place mentally. I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do because I had such passion for the environment. I didn't know how to express it. So I listed both companies for sale, and I actually just did that on Trade Me, and they both went to new homes, and unfortunately I don't believe either of them are still running, but they were certainly for a while. But I did learn a lot. So I learned that I am really, really good at creating stuff, and that I really love it, and hopefully stuff that people like. I also learned that I can't ignore the financial side of things, because that can get you into an awful lot of trouble. And the biggest thing I learned was that normal business is not enough for me, and that I need a purpose beyond making money. So these businesses didn't really have a point, right? I mean, one was about feeding people sugar, cream, and chocolate, and the other one was just about creating stuff and then selling it to them. There was no purpose behind it. So whilst I was working for myself, I was still bored. So the third time around, I wanted to approach the idea of running a business with a bit more thought. I started back at university to give myself some time to clear my head, and I was beginning to realize that what I needed to do was focus on the environment, having a positive impact on it, and the animals within it. So a few days after I signed the paperwork on my first business, and I felt super successful, because there's nothing like selling a business, even if it's for nothing at all, really, to make you feel like, you've achieved life. Although that wears off. I came up with the idea for Ethique, which we affectionately call the world's most sustainable cosmetics company. So I wanted to create a company that not only did good through its product, but also operated in the most ethical, generous, giving way possible, but still being financially sustainable itself. So I wasn't interested in the charitable model, because I just don't want to chase grants my whole life. I think people who do that have got the patience of saints. I couldn't do it. Maybe I will do one day, I don't know. I knew the environmental issues were piling up back then. The plastic movement was certainly not what it is today, or the plastic-free movement. But I knew that plastic pollution, mass extinction, deforestation, habitat loss, all of these things were growing by the day, and we'd known about them for years, but not a lot was being done. I knew that 40% of total plastic use comes from packaging, which tends to surprise people. So over 50% of all of the plastic that we make globally is single use. So it's literally used once and then binned. And of that, only 9% of all of the plastic we have ever made has ever been recycled. Recycling is not this big success story that we're led to believe. And it could be with more investment, and it needs to be, but right now it's not. I also knew that on average, New Zealanders use 50 million plastic bottles every year just for their personal care, so shampoo, conditioner, and body wash. And 75 to 90, or 70 to 90% of that is water. So doesn't it seem really bizarre that we make a product mostly water, package it in a plastic bottle, and then ship it around the world to customers who use it in a room filled with water? I thought that was a no-brainer. So that's why Ethique is all about getting rid of bottles in favor of bars. But no, it's not to be confused with soap, and I'm not going to go on about this very much, but you do kind of have to understand the concept. But they're exactly what you would get in a bottle of liquid product, just without the water removed. Now, we call Ethique the world's most sustainable cosmetics company for a lot of reasons. Number one, of course, is we have rid the world of plastic bottles, and this slide is already out of date because we've just announced that we hit 8 million bottles the other day. So it's a yay that we can that we've saved 7 million in terms of being disposed of, but it's also a yay that we've stopped it being manufactured, because plastic is particularly heavy in terms of carbon emissions, and I believe for every 350 ml plastic bottle of product, it's 450 grams of carbon dioxide emitted, depending on the plastic and all sorts of, there's variables, but it's about that much, so it's quite high. And recycling it is of course better, but that still uses a lot of energy usage. We wanted to skip the plastic in general. So we package our bars in compostable packagings. They're completely waste free. You can pop the box in your garden, bury it in a plant pot, in your green bin, whatever, and it will biodegrade or compost to be food for plants and microbes to support future life. We're of course cruelty-free, vegan. We use only sustainable, naturally derived ingredients, and unusually we are certified palm oil free. So I don't know if many of you understand about palm oil and the devastation that tends to wreak on environments in Malaysia, Indonesia, and now starting to in parts of Africa. But it is It's a very sad story, and it's a very complicated story, but until we believe there is a genuinely sustainable version or option for palm oil, and I don't believe we're there yet, we will continue to be palm free, which is quite difficult. But having a sustainable product was only one side of it. I wanted to operate as ethically as possible, and that meant considering everything and everyone who's involved. So we are a certified B Corp. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of B Corp out there. It is like a fair trade assessment for your entire company. It looks at how you treat your staff and how you treat your customers, although that should obviously be up there anyway. But what your product's life cycle is, from everything. It's I can see some people have heard about B Corps. Yes, awesome. It really is a phenomenal program. The biggest part about it is you do this big assessment at the beginning, and it shows you all your weaknesses. Now, I was pretty gutted because I wanted you get scored, and I think when we first did it, we scored 112, I think. I was really annoyed because I wanted 200. So we're recertifying this year, and going to get 200. I'm going to be the highest score in the world. That's the goal. We're also living wage certified, so that means everybody at Ethique gets paid at least the living wage, not the minimum wage. I don't believe the minimum wage is something that you can expect people to fairly live on. Your team are your single biggest asset that your business has. Without the people you work for, or who work for you, you will have nothing. So you have to look after them, and then in turn they will look after you. It's really, really critically important, and it's one that's often overlooked. Another facet of looking after people, of course, is supply chain. And in the cosmetics world, the supply chain is particularly hideous. For example, did you know that in almost every block of chocolate you've ever eaten, apart from a few wonderful businesses, and we've got quite a high concentration of them in New Zealand, but in almost every block of chocolate, there is likely to be a child labour component or a child trafficking component. The cocoa and cocoa butter industry is hideous. Involves a lot of child labour and trafficking and forced labour. It's really vile. So I wanted to make sure, of course, that we weren't involved in anything like that at all, which is why we work directly with so many of our producers. And some of the photos you can see here are coconut oil produced in Samoa. So our supply chain is very important to us. It's how we prove that we mean what we say, right? These guys, they really are. What is important? What direct trade is not is someone from a different country going in and setting up a business. What it is someone from somewhere else buying directly from businesses that already exist in different countries, and that is the model we've employed. So we don't go in to a country and set up a business that then supplies us. We buy directly from local organizations already, and that comes with challenges in a variety of ways, but it's really important, and you see the impact that it has. You get that close relationship with them, and you know that it's making a difference, and it really is a genuinely beautiful thing to do. Of course, the biggest problem facing our planet is climate change. Look, if there's people out there who are still denying this is happening, then that's entirely up to you. But we are working on becoming climate positive, which means we offset more carbon than we actually produce, but we are currently carbon neutral. So we do this with a whole bunch of investment into either renewable energies, or our electricity is through, Ecotricity, who are the coolest company. Highly recommend you check them out. We plant mangroves in places like Madagascar. We have plant forestry in various places, and we use a organisation called the Eden Project to do that. That is the way we know we can look after our planet. And again, this goes back to the nature thing that this current month is about for you guys. But my favorite part of Ethique is our charitable program. So typically 1% of all profits is donated to charity by big businesses, and it's usually in the form of a CSR program, corporate social responsibility. We donate 20%, and that has been since day one. And that, again, is a way of giving back. It's really important. Businesses have so much impact on the world around them. I truly believe that's the way we can fix so many of our problems. So we work with animal welfare groups, environmental protection agencies, or those working to protect our oceans, for example. We also work a lot with community education organisations, and it's my favourite part of Ethique. So you can, this is again part of the not necessarily business-minded moment of mine. A lot of people ask us why, if this is so important to us, why we don't donate 100% of our profits, and that goes back to the purpose. So that you have to be financially stable if you want to be around forever. Companies that don't manage their money will, of course, go under. But also, if you want to grow a global organization, we will need investment, and we have needed investment. And that means giving them a return. So that is why I have chosen a sort of a compromise model, so that we can both raise investment but also donate what I think is a fair amount of money. And 20% of profit is becoming a nice sizable chunk. So how did I actually start it? You will see, if you can see, the company name back then is actually different, and I look so much younger and wrinkle-free. Mind, businesses do that to you. So I started in my flat kitchen. Like I said, I'd started back at university, so that was sort of helpful because I had access to some lecturers and some advisors and things. I covered that flat in all sorts of shampoo and just mess everywhere. But I roped in a couple of friends very quickly to help me wrap and pack products, built that website, as I pointed out, or built another website, and just started from there. And really, I was just testing the market at that point, because this was such a new product, and I didn't know if people would like it, because it's a bar product, and it's a new concept. It's a new, how do you use it? So it was very much a pilot for a year, I guess, and I did that without realizing. About a year and a half in, it began to get again to the point where it was overwhelming for what I could do, and I didn't know how to take that next step, and I was really, I guess, scared, for lack of a better term. And this is where the university came in really handy, because I entered a university competition called Entree 85K, where you get paired with a business mentor, and then you write a business plan and then have to do like a fight to the death pitch style thing. Now, we didn't win, which is totally fine. We're totally over it 8 years later. But I did gain my business mentor as a business partner. And he has been along for the ride since. And what more than anything, whilst he wasn't involved in the cosmetics industry, more than anything, he gave me the confidence to believe in myself. And like 3 days after we had finished that competition, I went and signed a lease and moved out of my house into our first little factory. And I mean, like, it was a 90 square meter, a little garage, but it was freedom, right? It was a real business. And that was where we first became a business and not a hobby, I suppose. Next came funding. A lot of people ask me how you fund a company now. This may not be to everybody's tastes, but I really like equity crowdfunding. So a couple of years after we had moved into this unit, we had been bootstrapping the whole way. We were running out of money, and we couldn't do a lot of the things I really wanted to do. And that is really frustrating. Not having money to carry out ideas will be transformative to a business is really irritating. And I knew the biggest thing was branding. If you saw in that previous photo, the branding was very amateur. And it just wasn't something that retailers really responded to. So equity crowdfunding had just been legalized in New Zealand. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's the idea where you sell shares like on a mini stock market. And Pledge Me had, I think, just completed 2 successful ones, one of them being the Yeasty Boys, who raised about $500,000 in 15 seconds or something mental. They did an absolutely epic job. So that was really interesting. And what I really liked about it was that it doesn't matter how much money you have, you could invest in companies that you love and go along for the ride. So it's not a rewards type crowdfunding round, it's an equity base. So we have 352 shareholders now. So our first round we did in 2015, and we raised $200,000 from 152 people in about 10 days. Hi, Alex. It was very exciting watching it click over to 200,000. It's such an epic ride. You have to prepare. You have to have a great video, beautiful branding, and an awesome story. But you don't have to have everything sorted, right? We went out there, we weren't selling a lot. We knew what we wanted to do, so we had that purpose. We had a great plan, although plans, never really come as you expect. And we had a great story to tell, and that is what I think brought people along for the ride. Um, so yeah, you get emails every sort of 15 minutes or so saying so and so has just pledged $30,000 to your campaign. I mean, that's the greatest email you'll ever get. I highly recommend equity crowdfunding if you want to fund a business. So much so that we actually did it again. So in 2017, we raised 500,000 in less, I think. Actually, it says less than a day, but it was actually 19 minutes. And I was on stage the whole time at a speaking event for the Social Enterprise World Forum. And it was incredible because the audience was calling out what the total was at the time. And I'd forgotten because, in the nerves of speaking to a couple of thousand of people in the audience, I'd totally forgotten that we were also doing something enormous over here. And people, and Anna from Pledge Me was in the audience, and she was starting to message me, and it was crazy. And again, the success for crowdfunding, in my opinion, comes from having that story, having that great visual branding, and just having people back your purpose. And now, what I really hope for those 350 shareholders is that one day we'll be able to pay off their mortgages. They supported us when other people didn't want to, and now a lot of people want to, in terms of the bigger investment players, and we are not particularly interested in playing with a lot of them for obvious reasons. But now we really want to make sure that we reward those shareholders in due course, and I think that's a pretty epic success story for them. So I highly recommend equity crowdfunding, but you do have to put a lot of thought into it. But how did we go from a little 90 square meter unit to being stocked in 16 countries? And the plan was another 5 before the end of the year, although of course plans have been changed slightly. Well, the biggest sort of transformative moment was in 2016, and yes, there's a picture of Britney Spears there, because she was involved too. Yes, I'm 33, so I grew up listening to Britney Spears. Yes, I'm a fangirl. No, I don't care. I did an article for Forbes magazine. Now, if you know Forbes magazine, you'll know that it is enormous. And when I did this interview, I thought, oh, wow, this will absolutely set the world on fire. Everybody will know about Ethique. I've always had big ambitions for Ethique. I say $1 billion company, and people used to laugh at me, and people don't laugh anymore. But I have always dreamed big. And so when Forbes came along, I was like, yes, this is going to set the world on fire. We're going to go everywhere. It's going to be amazing. And in that first day, 4 people read it, because there's little counters at the bottom. Well, there used to be. More people have read it now, but back then that was pretty soul crushing. But about 2 weeks later, I woke up to, of all things, a Facebook message from a Huffington Post reporter who had just said, I really liked your story, so I've posted it on the HuffingtonPost.com. And that was when I looked at my email account and saw the thousands of emails, and on our website, thousands of orders and answers. I think we even had an answer machine. It was full. It was a while ago. Our social media accounts blew up. It was mental. We literally went viral, and that is such an overused term these days, but we really did. And to be honest, whilst it was amazing initially, it very quickly grew overwhelming. The team of 4 back then was in tears. We were still making batches of 4 kgs at a time. We had to cancel or email them all and cancel 98% of these orders and just say, look, we've just got no ability to fulfill these. We had no idea this was coming. It was a crazy time. About a week later, and it didn't really help, but epic now looking back on it. So both Britney Spears and Ashton Kutcher individually shared them on their Facebook pages. So my mother texted me at 7 o'clock in the morning and said, Britney Spears has shared you on her Facebook page. And of course, being a 25-year-old horrible person in the morning, I probably wasn't very nice to my mother at that point, and said something, of course she hasn't, go back to sleep or something. But she had, and we have the screenshots to prove it, just in case. And that was a day that took the stress away, and I think everybody danced around the office just listening to Britney Spears music. Yes, I know. It was a fun day. And that was what showed us, beyond everything else, beyond all the excitement and all the stress, that was what showed us that this product had legs offshore. So New Zealanders are environmentally minded, right? But as the rest of the world, I wasn't sure. I hadn't traveled very much at that point. I had no idea what the rest of the world really thought in terms of this kind of product. So that gave us the idea, or gave us the certainty. You're never certain, but it made us believe that we could take this product internationally, and that's what kickstarted the export journey. And of course, it's hardly been plain sailing from there, and it's difficult, but because we have had this big press base and it continues to build, and because we've got this really strong purpose and story, we get a lot of retailers from all over the world approaching us. And our largest retail partners, like Holland and Barrett or Boots, for example, we never approached them, they have approached us, a company based in New Zealand. So I think that sort of speaks to the power of what I'm going to talk about and my tips in a couple of minutes. And I'm just keeping an eye on the time. I promise I won't be too much longer. As I mentioned, there has been massive challenges along the way. I could never imagine doing anything else because I love highs. I don't love lows, but I mean, you've got to have a low to love a high. I love the up and down of running a business, and I love creating something that genuinely makes a positive impact. Is really important. But there's been huge challenges. Some of the biggest have been people related. It is difficult to get people who see things the way you do, and you shouldn't get people who see the things the way you do, because you don't want a company of you, because I have massive weaknesses and you will have massive weaknesses. You need people to balance those out, and that's a bit of an ego kill, and it's probably something a lot of people struggle to get over to start with, but you need people to balance those out. So now we hire for attitude or passion or values rather than experience, because with experience they may not have that passion for what we do so much. Manufacturing and scaling, of course, has been a nightmare. This is a product that people typically don't make at scale. That has been hard to do. But a team of experts and engineers and a lot of money figured that out for us, which we are very grateful. So I wanted to put together some very quick tips of what I believe apply not just to business, but to any kind of enterprise at all that you want to build. So number one is trust yourself. I get asked a lot about imposter syndrome, and I very rarely feel comfortable in a room. Not because I'm a particularly shy person. I'm obviously relatively extroverted to a degree, but I always feel like the least experienced, stupidest person in the room. And I know that that is really common, but with that comes this: you're more likely to ignore what you're saying internally in favor of what someone who you perceive to be cleverer or has more experience in a field. And that's not necessarily the best option. You should absolutely listen to other people, absolutely. But it's important to trust your gut, because you've built something, or you're building something, and you're building around values that are important to you. So it is really important to make sure that just because someone over here has all this experience, talks a really good game, don't just accept what they're saying verbatim. Let something sit with you, and if you really can't do something, then don't do it. Good mentors will give you advice, but then not be upset if you don't take it. That's a really important one. This is one I go on about all the time. I believe a business should have a purpose, and I also believe that most bigger businesses in particular cannot their employees, their teams, their shareholders cannot articulate that purpose. And it doesn't have to be some grand purpose about ridding the world of plastic bottles, for example. It doesn't have to be about making life easier for anybody. What it means is something you're striving for beyond making money. Your customer does not care if you want to buy another boat. You have to be able to talk about why your company is making something better or making their life easier. So it's really important to have that. And it has to be something that actually matters to you. It can't be something you think will matter to a whole bunch of people. It has to actually be embedded into you, and therefore embedded into the company. And you cannot make decisions that counter it. And number three is to be different. So I do a bit of mentoring and I really love it, but a lot of businesses out there seem to struggle articulating what the difference is about their business versus their competitors. And there is honestly not that many products out there that are truly, truly unique. But that isn't necessarily what makes your business unique. There is a multitude of other factors. Whether it's the values based on it, where it's made, who makes it, where it's shipped. It could be anything. But you need to say why I should buy your product over a competitor's. And again, so many people cannot. So that's got to be the number one. You have to make their choice easy. If you can't tell me why your product is better than your competitors, how am I as a consumer supposed to know? And that really wraps that up.
Question time. One from Brandon early on was, how many employees does Ethique have?
Good question. We actually have 11 direct employees in head office in Christchurch. We are building infrastructure around the world in terms of logistics facilities, manufacturing or potential offshore manufacturing in America and Europe. And so we'll add to the team, but also in terms of our manufacturing, because in New Zealand we partner with co-packers in America is what you call them, but contract manufacturers, we indirectly employ about 160 others.
Cool. And that's amazing. That Brandon posted that question and when you were talking about the living wage, and so just putting that in perspective of that many people being paid living wage is pretty incredible. Yeah, has asked, it seems like you made some big leaps in how you think about business. Aside from purpose, how did you educate yourself on what goes into a successful business?
People. I've talked about people a bit. I am very, very lucky that I haven't gone out looking for them, but I'm surrounded by really, really clever, passionate people who either care about the same things I care about or have the passion for business in general. And I have learned watching them. I read a lot and I find that helpful to a degree, but real world, I think you've got to learn off people, and it comes down to mentorships. And unfortunately, mentors can be really difficult to find. So I appreciate that I'm very lucky, but I have learned everything I know from the people around me. Yeah, it's not an easy fix, unfortunately, that one. But reading is great. There's some great books out there. Anything written or spoken by Simon Sinek is one of my favorites. He's all about purpose and your why.
Yeah. I love that. Simon Sinek was actually a recommendation of Holly's last month as well. So yeah, 2 incredible women recommending him. Make sure you check them out. Ryan, were there any choices you initially made that you believed to be more ethical than they actually turned out to be?
Yes. And that is something that happens a lot with values-based decisions. And that's why I am much more focused probably now on the science and explaining something than on the visuals of something to a customer. The example would be our packaging. So back when we were Sorbet, when we first initially started, same company, everything was wrapped in water-soluble packaging. And it was awesome because you take the whole bar into the shower and it would the packaging would dissolve down the drain. And I had asked the manufacturer what it was made out of. It was made out of cellulose, and he gave me a bit of a breakdown of the process, but he also greenwashed me a little bit, and I was naive back then. So I did a bit more digging when we redid our branding and became Ethique, and I found out that actually that process is very un-environmentally friendly. And in terms of life cycle of the entire product, we would be that much better shifting to a typical cardboard and something that the customer would then compost. And I know quite a lot of people were disappointed in that decision because to them it did seem like a step backwards for the environment perspective, but it very much wasn't. So when we look at putting in a new initiative, we do spend a lot of time on researching the whole, whether if it's a product related, the whole life cycle or the whole impact that will have, because sometimes it backfires in ways you can see that just when you look around the world, but things backfire when you don't expect them to.
Yeah. Thank you for your honesty in these questions too. It's really, really awesome. Kaio has asked, in how many countries are Ethique's products available?
16. Oh God, don't ask me to list them. Our major markets are the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and we're moving into Hong Kong and Singapore later on this year. But we're also in sort of smaller levels and a few countries dotted around as well.
Cool. And the follow-up to that is, do you produce locally in those countries? And if not, or partially, how are you solving or remaining sustainable while shipping?
Good question. So with these sort of ethical choices also comes financial sustainability questions. Now, it has never ever made environmental sense or sense to me that everything, because New Zealand doesn't make cosmetic ingredients. It just doesn't. We might have a couple like lavender oil, for example, but the majority of what goes into a shampoo, for example, is just not made here. So it has to be shipped in, and it doesn't make sense to ship something in and then ship it back out, right? However, you can minimize the footprint of that process, but you can never eradicate it entirely. So we have always aimed, we will always keep some manufacturing and HQ in New Zealand, always. But we will manufacture for some market, for our European and maybe American markets, potentially closer to source. It just makes more sense environmentally. It will lower the carbon footprint. And as long as we don't impact jobs here in any way, I don't see that as a negative. So that is something we are looking to do. We don't have a timeline on it because all our timelines have been delayed slightly, as everybody's has. So yeah, it's absolutely something we are considering, but that is why we're aiming for carbon positive, so that even if every time when we have our carbon footprint measured by an independent organisation, every time we have that done, we always want to make sure that we just tick over it just to, really try and counteract that.
Cool. I'm going to skip a couple of questions and come back to them because you've mentioned COVID here, and we have a question from Sophia asking what your biggest learning has been from the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on the world, both personally and professionally. And I guess I'd add to that, how is it impacting Ethique?
It hasn't. The biggest impact, I suppose, that it has delayed things and it has stopped a lot of things happening, and it has disrupted our international partners to a greater degree than it has disrupted us, which has then flowed on to us, of course. So as the majority of our products are exported offshore, we have sort of suffered in that way. We've tried to be as flexible as possible. So our retailers in New Zealand, we've offered friendlier terms and reduced minimums and discounts and those sorts of things, and done what we can to help support our retailers here. But at the end of the day, we do have to factor in that we too need to survive this. It's not been as catastrophic as honestly we initially thought it would be, I suppose. At the end of the day, we do sell a hygiene product, and that helps. And we were it's handy. A lot of our products were deemed essential from day one, especially as we supply into supermarkets. We voluntarily stopped selling some of our products like our moisturizers and stuff because we didn't want to back up what was clearly an overwhelmed supply chain. Yeah, and look, it's going to affect people for a long, long time. I know a lot of people are like, oh, come July, this is all going to be over. I really don't think that's true. I think we're going to be living through a genuinely turbulent, challenging, stressful time. But yeah, Ethique will make it through, and we will come through the other end, and we will be. I always feel awkward saying thriving because I don't want to make it look like, yay, we're doing so well and others are suffering, right? Because it's not what I mean at all. But we will come out the end, the other side, and be in a position to continue growing, I guess is what I'm saying.
Awesome. Cool. A bit of a switch in focus. Bhavya has asked, how much of an impact did the visual branding and the kind of more constant social media presence make?
Massive. I put a huge amount of our success to visuals in general, and you see that because we changed from sorbet, which was a little bit more amateur, to Ethique, and we saw the pickup in retail almost immediately, and nothing else changed, because you've got to have something that is shelf ready or appealing to the consumer's eye, and social media that goes along too. You've got to have something eye-catching. You've got to stand out in a very crowded room. I think having good design is really important. And I do see it as something that a lot of business owners who are really passionate about their product, they might tend to leave till last. I do recommend that you invest in that area. Made a huge difference.
Yeah, cool. I suspect that this one could have quite a long answer, but is there any way you can summarize? Sarah from Third Eye has asked, how does the product work in bar form?
Yeah. It is a long answer. Because it depends on the product. So we have shampoo, moisturizers, face cleansers, but in a simplistic term, they are exactly what's in a bottle, but they just don't have the water, and you are already using them with water. So you simply dilute them on your skin or in your hair or whatever. I don't want to point people. I'm not interested in advertising at all, but if you're genuinely interested in how they work, we've got videos on various social media platforms or our website that does explain and show, and we do a lot of education because a lot of people are like, how on earth does a bar work? That makes no sense. So we go into quite in-depth science about what it is that makes a cosmetic work, and some of the greenwashing myths that go on in the industry as well. So we We do get that question a lot, but it is quite a long answer.
No, that's cool. I've watched some of those videos when I first got one of the shampoo blocks, and I was like, do I put it on my head? Do I put it in my hands? So yeah, check out the videos. Rach has asked, how do you feel about the upcoming product stewardship law changes?
We don't yet probably know enough about them.
Yeah.
So, and thankfully my product and regulatory manager will deal with that more than I will, to a degree. But I do believe this is a hideously unregulated industry, and it could do with more than what is coming.
Cool. How did you begin the process of finding local producers or agricultural products to work with for your products?
Lots and lots of Googling, but that eventually taps out, obviously. So then we started reaching out to people like TradeAid. Who do you know of? Oxfam's actually been really useful in that. They know local producers, and they specialise in helping with international trade or local trade. So just talk to people we know. Yeah, Google was definitely not the answer there. I thought it would be for a long time, but the internet finally let me down. Talking to people who know more than you do is always the answer to pretty much every question.
Yeah, cool. And this is a cool question from Mama Can, who is a botanical artist and who loves the beauty of native New Zealand plants. And Mama Can, if you're still here, can you drop a link or something to your art in the chat? Because I'm sure there are tons of people here that would love to see that. The question is, do you use any native plants in your products?
We use a couple, but in all honesty, not too many. And the answer to that is, might upset a few people. There is not a great deal of evidence that botanical extracts will work in the concentrations they are used in typical cosmetics, and they are often there as label appeal, right? So we don't go into the active side too much. There are some fabulous botanical extracts without question, but you have to make sure you include them at a higher level. And that is something we're looking to do with a new range that we're going to launch later this year. It's probably been pushed to early next year. And we're going to launch a New Zealand focus range, which I'm very excited about. And it's probably been a long time coming. So that will include those sorts of things. But typically, we use a few things that are grown here as much as possible. But there is a few companies out there use like Kanuka and Manuka, which are of course proven beyond doubt to actually have scientific benefits. But again, it's the concentration in the cosmetics that's the important bit.
Cool, thank you for that. How are you going for time, Brianne? You happy to keep going? We've still got quite a few. Yeah, good. Cool. Alex has asked 2 questions. The first being, are you talking to other cosmetic companies who are showing interest in the ethical production and packaging that you're doing? Have you had kind of industry and interest from that?
Yeah, we have had a bit more from offshore.
Okay.
And I've been asked to speak about this sort of thing. But the difficulty other cosmetic companies have is they have liquid products, and we really only have any experience in solid, because solid equals cardboard. Well, it can, you don't have to wrap it in plastic. So I guess it's kind of the idea of showing in general what a plastic-free company can do and the success and how much consumers value it. So I'm always willing to talk to people, but I don't typically get approached too much in New Zealand.
Okay, cool. And another question from Alex was, in their area, they're seeing, which I think we all unfortunately do, littered plastic bottles being thrown on grass or, not making it to bins. How can we encourage people to pick them up and dispose of them as ethically as possible when the plastic bottle exists?
Well, you're never going to get rid of it, plastic bottles. Look, my initial goal was to rid the world of plastic bottles, and it's as naive as it is stupid. You're just not going to. And I believe there is a place for plastic in the world. You're not going to get rid of it. Medical care, for example, you just cannot get rid of plastic. So we need to improve our recycling, and there's a variety of ways to do that. But you need to educate people as to why littering is bad. It always comes back to education, because education, when people know about something, they care about something and they love it. You know, it's why zoos exist a lot of the time. I know a lot of people don't like zoos. I personally think they do a lot more good. Well, the good ones do a lot more good than bad. And I think it's about, if someone sees the damage that an activity or something, a choice that they think is doesn't make any difference, if they see what it actually does down the track and they can link it to their behavior, they'll go, oh, well, I don't want to do that anymore. It's all about education, and it's not necessarily people's fault. They don't know a lot of the time. I mean, some people just don't care, but most people are good, and most people want to do good, so they need that education.
Yeah, cool.
Most people still think all plastic is recycled.
Yeah. Or that it doesn't need to be cleaned to be recycled.
Exactly. There is just so much nonsense about recycling, because people are confused, because all the information put out is different, because your local recycling infrastructure is different between every town. Yeah. How are consumers supposed to detangle that?
Yeah. Awesome. Would you say the research is a critical element in your business decisions and processes? That's from Hannah.
I'm not sure if you are referring specifically to product research, so R&D, or if you're referring to external market research, but absolutely, R&D for products is of course critical, so because we always have to maintain a new product pipeline and make sure they work, make sure people want them, and make sure they're innovative. So that's an absolute yes. As for research into, say, a new market, you must always make sure you know what you're getting into, and your partners, and the markets that you're going into in terms of the consumer and what they expect and what they like and what they don't like and the cultural differences. So research is critical, and it's really interesting. You get to learn about new people and new countries and customs and cultures. I mean, you don't have to plan everything to death. I'm not a big fan of planning everything to within an nth degree. And Ethique, we haven't written a 45-page business plan in years, because we don't need one. We believe in a plan on a page and agility and being able to pivot when we need to. But research is important, absolutely.
Cool. I love this question from Kelly Library. Who's the graphic designer? Because they love the branding.
It's a combination of a couple of people, actually. So a wonderful team member, Jenny, has been with me across most of my businesses since I think we were about 20. So she does the majority of it. But the bare bones were laid down, I guess that would have been 2016, by a company called Double Lux in Christchurch. They're quite they're a boutique company, but very well regarded, and they did an epic job.
Awesome. Yeah, so it looks like that's all of our questions. Are there any last comments you wanted to say, Brianne?
Alan, if you're still there, you're dead right. There is no need to test on animals anymore in the cosmetics world. It's a despicable practice. A lot of countries, the EU, for example, has of course banned it. A lot of countries are following suit. There are two big holdouts. I'm sure you probably know who they are. And I believe that they will change in the near future too. So I have faith that it will be gone by 2025. And the big companies that a lot of people think do a lot of it are often the companies who are also putting the most research into finding alternatives.
Yeah. Awesome.
That was just because I saw that comment. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I love it.
But thank you for listening, guys. I hope that was interesting. Yeah, have a lovely day.